Hey everyone, so it's time to talk about the end of One Piece, or at least what I believe is going to be the final chapter. I think the story of One Piece is set to end with the death of the main character, Luffy. Now, this is obviously not the ending people want to hear. I think the warm, fan-fiction-y ending is that the Straw Hats accomplish all their dreams, get the One Piece, free the world, and then sail around happily and carefree, going on adventures pretty much indefinitely. Even if the crew were to break up and disband after finding One Piece, I still think people don't want Luffy to just go and die afterwards. However, I think that this is simply the most likely way that Luffy's story ends, and it wouldn't necessarily be in a sad way. I think it would be the most weirdly satisfying main character death I've seen in any series, simply because of the way Luffy's character is written, and the type of story Oda has set up, where this was always meant to be the end. This was always the final destination for the protagonist. I believe One Piece will end with Luffy turning himself into the Marines, as Roger did, and being executed in Logtown, as Roger was. Now, I know you might be thinking, Morge, that's a repetitive and lame way to end the story, just having Luffy basically copy Roger and go out like that. Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but first let me start with the simplest but most definitive reason why I believe that this final event, Luffy's execution, is practically set in stone. The name of the town that the Pirate King was executed in was Logtown. This is known as the town of beginnings and ends. That in itself is a very ominous name, but as my good friend Ohara pointed out a long time ago in one of his first videos ever, the name itself, Logtown, is literally reflective of prologues and epilogues. It is a town of beginnings and ends in a very literal sense. And if we look at how Oda has structured the story of One Piece, it seems as though all of East Blue is very much meant to be the prologue of the story. This narration in chapter 100 is basically like the thesis of One Piece. This is where Oda is finally actually laying out the fundamental ideas of what this epic is going to be about. And only from here, from this chapter on, leaving the East Blue, leaving the town of beginnings and ends, does the legend of Luffy actually begin. Everything before all of this, all of East Blue, was just introducing the main characters and giving us some starting exposition. But the legend actually begins at chapter 100, setting off from the town of beginnings, Logtown, basically marking the end of the prologue and the start of the epic. Just as leaving this town marks the end of the prologue and the first chapter of the legend, returning to it should mark the end of the epilogue and likely the final chapter of the legend. And really, it's important to note that this was the first location we were shown in the story, period, with the very first scene ever taking place in Logtown. I think the naming behind this town indicates this is a location that was literally created to be the end and the beginning of the story, the start and the finish, which is further reinforced by what it represents as the start and end of the Pirate King story, and what it has already served as the start of Luffy's story, all basically meaning that it was essentially written in stone that Luffy's story would always end here as well. I just personally cannot imagine Oda writing and creating a specific location in his story that is the literal representation of prologues and epilogues, and not have planned from the start to have his epic conclude here. This is something that just seems very clear to me, honestly the clearest way ever that an author could possibly signpost where his character is going to end, such that I personally have extreme difficulty imagining an alternative story where Luffy is not back here in the end. And if the final chapter is in Logtown, then I think the only imaginable reason would be for Luffy's execution. I doubt it would just be, sightseeing again. So, with this as the basic starting point for why it is very likely to happen, Luffy's execution in Logtown, now let's talk about the objections. So first of all, would it be a good ending, or would it be repetitive? To me, I think Luffy's journey, and really the story of One Piece, was always meant to be a full circle. Literally the very layout of the adventure that Oda planned, a journey around the entire world, is reflective of this idea of things coming full circle. And I don't think it would just be a repetition of Roger's death, because the same event can happen, but with now a completely different meaning and weight behind it and significance behind it. What we know now for a fact is that Roger ultimately failed in some way. Not through any fault of his own, he was just born too early. But he could not do anything with what he found in Rafto. The whole reason he chose to go out the way that he did and spark this great search for a treasure was so that a much greater will could be fulfilled. That is the basis behind this entire grand epic, that this treasure must be found and so people must go out and search for it. Now what's interesting is that the more we've learned about the world, and the more theories that have come out about what the One Piece is, the most compelling theories to me all tend to involve the notion that One Piece is going to be something that affects the entire world in a positive way. It's not just going to be a treasure just for Luffy, it's something that is much grander than that. We obviously know it's not just gold and silver, and I personally doubt it's something like, putting all the ancient weapons together, which is just a very generic idea in my book. But many have suggested things like One Piece being the unification of all islands in the world, or my personal favorite, the destruction of the Red Line, and the creation of one, giant open ocean. These types of ideas seem the most compelling and most likely to me personally, as they actually mean something in the context of the themes and the overarching context of the story. And so if we go along this train of thought, that whatever this One Piece is going to be will be something that affects the world at large, then how does that change things for Luffy's execution versus Roger's? Well, whereas Roger's was about sending people out to find a great treasure that could change the world for the better, Luffy's execution will be after having found this great treasure and already changing the world through finding it. As such, to me, there is no ending more powerful or more poetic than for this grand epic to start this way, with Roger at the execution stance sending people out for a treasure that will change the world, and for this epic to ultimately come back full circle, back to the very same event that started it, but now with the man who found the treasure and gave it to the world on the stand instead. To me, that is the perfect way to open a book and close it, with two mirroring events, but one completing the other. And I doubt Luffy's final words would be sending people out to search for a great treasure again. I imagine his final words would likely be more so along the lines that he has, given his treasure to the world, or something like that. Basically, if Roger's last words were the opening of a great will, then Luffy's last words would likely be symbolizing the fulfillment of a great will. So, would it be a bad ending? No, I personally think it would be a great ending. But beyond that, does it even make sense plot-wise? Because a huge objection, of course, is that, first of all, if Luffy is the one who will bring the dawn of the world, if we imagine that by the end of the day the Celestial Dragons will be defeated, the world government will be completely rebooted and reformed into a better organization and so on, etc., then by the end, isn't it possible that, Luffy will be viewed as a hero who brought the dawn of the world? Would he still be considered a criminal at the end of all this that needs to be executed? I think yes. I think the fact that Luffy is considered a pirate will never really change no matter what happens. I don't think it's as simple as, defeating the old order and establishing a new order means that Luffy will suddenly be off the hook for his long career of piracy, and I don't think a pardon is going to be coming his way either. Even if the new order is generally going to be composed of several good guy characters, like maybe Vivi plays a big role in the New World Government, and now Kobe is a prominent marine or whatever, I don't think outside of the people who actually know Luffy, that everyone in the New Order is just going to wave away his history. I think there will be an interesting general world view of him, where I think many citizens, or most citizens of the world, will know that Luffy and his crew were the ones who ended up bringing about a better world, and maybe some people will view them as heroes, and then some will still view them as pirates, but at the end of the day, I think his official label will still be a pirate. A pirate who may have done something very grand and heroic, but probably still a pirate nonetheless, and I just think that the label of pirate is just too important to Luffy's character for it to ever go away. Nor do I think that he would ever want it to go away. So yes, even if he is widely acknowledged as a good guy or even a hero at the end of the day, who knows, the one thing I do think is definite is that he will never stop being called a pirate. And so if the Marines can catch him, then they will. The Marines aren't going away either by the end of the story, they will likely just be reformed. But I doubt that that reform will mean that they're just going to stop chasing pirates. Now, why would Luffy be caught and executed? Well, of course, Luffy will never be caught. I'm saying more likely we will see a Gold Roger scenario of Luffy having accomplished everything he wants and is finally choosing to turn himself in. Not because he's suicidal, but because I believe that Luffy's quickly shortening lifespan is simply going to catch up to him by the end of the story. So there obviously needed to be a reason for Roger to turn himself in at the end of his adventure, which is why Oda wrote in that incurable disease that he caught. I think if Oda always planned for Luffy to end his story the same way, then Oda needed to also write in an equivalent final reason for Luffy to turn himself in for execution beyond just finding the One Piece. After all, if Luffy became Pirate King and accomplished all of his goals, then it would be really weird for him to just want to get executed. Like, that doesn't really fit. There needs to be something that makes him be like, okay, I did everything I wanted, I'm not going to cling on to life anymore. At this point, now it's time to go. I think that's why Oda has been playing up Luffy's loss of lifespan so frequently. First, we were told that Gear Second regularly shaves away at his life, and he's been using Gear Second extremely frequently. This should have some sort of meaning, this should come into play at some point, and now, even if we say Luffy's gotten used to Gear Second and maybe he doesn't have that drawback anymore, we have to add in everything Luffy did throughout Impel Down and Marineford. Luffy lost even more years of his lifespan trying to save Ace. I think this all has to catch up to Luffy eventually, and the most fitting point would be after his adventure is over, after he's pushed his body as far as he needed to and gotten everything he could out of his life. That's when his lifespan is most likely to run out. And I want to take a look at the way Oda has written Luffy as a character as well, because that goes hand in hand with this. Luffy is not written like a real person. He is more so a sort of idealized way of living brought to life, this embodiment of free-spiritedness and living with no regrets. What grounds him is that he has this one goal in life, to find the One Piece, but what's important is that he doesn't really want anything beyond the treasure. He doesn't want to do anything with the treasure, to use it or abuse it, to gain more power with it. I don't know if Luffy even cares what the One Piece is, and he certainly doesn't want to know. The appeal of One Piece is of course the title of King of the Pirates and the achievement of absolute freedom on the seas, but maybe even beyond that is simply the journey. Lots of protagonists have dreams and goals, but Luffy is unique in that maybe more than any other protagonist that I've seen, he is written to care about the journey more than the dream itself. That's what's important. This grand adventure to find One Piece is the greatest thing possible for Luffy. This journey to get to it is the experience of a lifetime. Everything Luffy says, and the way he thinks, seems to me like he's a character that is written to have nothing more that really matters beyond the horizon of achieving this dream, because the journey there is already everything he could ask for. And this is the other aspect of him that is played up repeatedly, that first of all, he is not afraid of death and does not mind the possibility. All he cares about is living life without regrets. That's the very reason he is so willing to throw away years of his life. Those years in the future don't matter to him. If he can accomplish what he cares about without having anything to regret or anything that he didn't get to do or maybe should have done at the end of the day, then Luffy's life will essentially be complete. So finding the One Piece, becoming Pirate King, that is all there is for him. That is a complete life for someone like Luffy. He's never written to think about things beyond that future. Not about, some love interest that's budding, or some responsibility that will come with being king of the pirates, or some greater goal he wants to maintain, such as making sure the world stays free or something like that. This journey that we're on right now, that is everything to Luffy. And as long as he completes this journey without regrets, there doesn't really need to be anything else. To me, Oda wrote Luffy from the start as a character who was pretty much destined to die happily, enjoying every step of the journey, living with no regrets, never fearing death, and not really caring for anything beyond achieving his one goal. So all that being said, I do think there is an argument that, Luffy's happy ending is getting to adventure freely for decades after becoming Pirate King and going to new islands and such. But just the way he is written, the way he has actually been written, it's as though Oda has always framed this character in such a way that it was really clear from the start that this is all he really cares about. This is the adventure that any other adventure would pale in comparison to. There doesn't need to be any more adventures after this, because again, this is the adventure of the lifetime. There will be no regrets and nothing more to be done once this adventure is over, as this is all Luffy needs to have a completely fulfilled life. However, to be fair, I will acknowledge that there are three things that you could argue as missing pieces towards this whole idea. First of all, Chopper. So Chopper's dream is to be able to cure any disease. I think there is a very good argument that if Luffy's natural life seems like it's going to come to a close, that Chopper, for the sake of his character and his ultimate test, must be able to step in and save him. However, for me personally, the distinction that I would draw here would be that I think that there will be a difference between disease, a disease, and simply shortening one's lifespan. I think it's entirely possible that Luffy comes down with an incurable disease down the line, maybe the very same one that Roger did. And then Chopper has to be able to cure it in order for Luffy to survive and make it to Raftel or make it to the final war or whatever it may be. However, the idea of Luffy's shortening lifespan may simply be a different category entirely. It's not like there would be anything for Luffy to need to be cured of, it's simply his natural life would be ending. We don't know exactly what shortening the lifespan entails, but it may just be the same as dying of old age, but just at, a much younger age because you used all your lifespan up, or however the One Piece logic would go. Again, it's not really a disease. Chopper should be able to cure every disease by the end, but just dying because your time's up may just be a different situation entirely that's outside of his jurisdiction. Now, the other point is Law. A lot of people, myself included, believe that Law will die and that Law's immortality operation, where he sacrifices himself to give someone else immortality, will come into play. Now, would this person be Luffy? I think yes, that makes the most sense on paper, as that is the most meaningful person in the story that Law could sacrifice himself for, the person that fulfilled his lifelong ambition to defeat Doflamingo. That's just the bond that, Luffy and Law have at this point. However, do we think that Luffy would ever actually get immortality? Does that make sense for him? I think that would be really, really weird to have a protagonist that's just immortal, and it goes strongly against what Oda seems to be setting up with all this lifespan shaving stuff. Like, all the sacrifices Luffy is making would be completely hollow and pointless if Law could just make him immortal. I'd say there's not enough at the moment that we know about the immortality operation to really make a good call here. Does it truly mean immortality? Could it just mean transferring your lifespan over to someone else? Maybe Law doesn't even do the surgery for Luffy. Maybe it's even Law sacrificing himself to do the surgery to even reverse immortality on someone else. We just don't know at the moment, so I'm going to leave that aside for the time being. And lastly, there is one route, maybe the most drastically different route the story could take at the very end that would not involve Luffy dying. Space. I think everything about the way Luffy is written is, again, setting him up for this to be his grandest and only adventure of a lifetime. I don't think anything compares to the journey of finding One Piece, because that simply tops everything. However, the significance of space, and even the idea of going to space, has been kind of a weird, lurking possibility in the background of the story, and we've learned that there are even space pirates. The one alternative ending I could imagine is that after Luffy and the Straw Hats have accomplished everything there is to be done in the Grand Line, then going along with the idea of this being a story with infinite possibilities, the story could end with them literally leaving this Earth for a lifetime more of adventures beyond anything that could be imagined on Earth, stuff that we're not going to see, but it's just going to end with them heading out into the great unknown. So that would be the most fantastical, sort of surreal, dreamlike ending that I could imagine. I will say that I definitely expect that over the course of the story, I do actually expect the Straw Hats to go to the moon, though that is a video for another time, but I do think that this is another weird possibility that exists, that the story itself could just end with them heading out into space, into the great unknown. I think it's a very slim chance, but I'd acknowledge it here. Ultimately, however, I think there is just too much behind the framing of Logtown as the town of beginnings and ends, where Luffy's story started and Roger's ended, the idea of coming full circle, the shortening of Luffy's lifespan, and just generally the way Luffy's character is written. All of that to me simply points to only one possible ending to One Piece, and that would be Luffy on the execution stand. So if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe, and you can support me on Patreon for extended thoughts on this and all future topics.